Yo, it's your boy Vegabomber, and welcome to Vegabomber Land. Okay, so I've been thinking about this for a while. Finally, what we have is about 14 movies that Disney's Marvel branch has put out. So whenever you put 14 out, or any number for that matter that can be compared to others, you've got to rank them. I mean, you just got to, right? Everybody has a different opinion as to which one is the number one movie out of all of those 14, where they are in number 2, 10, 5, and all that. So hell, I'm just going to tell you what mine are, because I think everyone else is doing it. In fact, this is a great segue for me to give a shout out to one of my new friends, internet friends, and subscriber, I would say, and that is Sean. Sean Talks Movies. So Sean, good on you, brother. I saw your list, and I agree with most of it. Now it's my turn to also put out there in this universe and let you know what the Bomber thinks of the 14 Marvel movies that were made by Disney. But before I jump into that, though, I need to kind of tell you what's my criteria for how I rank them. That way you'll kind of understand, well, why did he put this one there and this one here? So my criteria is just like this. Is the movie watchable? Like rewatchable, actually? Can I watch it several times? Is it a movie that I'll put in when the weather is just crappy and there's no reason to go outside and I got to stay inside anyway, and maybe I've broke the internet and there's nothing new to see on the internet or read on the internet? Yeah, like that happens. But just in case, what's my secret weapon? What movie will I pull out and rewatch again because I either enjoyed the performance or enjoyed the fun of the movie, or it's just something about how the movie was put together? So to me, how these films are ranked, it's basically because, or mostly in part, to whether they are rewatchable. So now, let me just get into it, because I know you're just waiting for me to get into it. So let's start with number 14 and work our way up to the top. And by the way, I'll let you know why they rank these places too for me. So here we go. Number 14, this one's an easy one. Iron Man 3. Now, I know some of you are going to say, yes, but that one did $1 billion. But numerics doesn't necessarily mean that the movie was great. It just means that a bunch of people who found the film exciting or enjoyable or whatever went to go see it. That's all. I would not say that Avatar is the best movie just because it's the top ranked or most grossing, most receipt getting from the box office than the other movie. I don't think it's worth that. But somebody went to go see it several times, probably in busloads. So for me, Iron Man 3. Now, why at the bottom, very, very bottom? Well, first of all, I didn't like the idea that, it's supposed to be, Iron Man's supposed to have post-traumatic stress syndrome. I didn't really buy it because he was still cracking jokes and still being witty, and then he just seemed to freak out over every little thing when they wanted him to, but when they didn't want him to, he seemed to be just the old Tony. And I was just kind of like, well, that doesn't work. I also just thought that the twist that they threw in there with the Mandarin was pretty weak. I was actually liking it up until we found that moment out. It seemed like to me Iron Man 3 defaulted to say, well, hey, let's just be funny rather than be good. And so, you want to say funny? Sure, lots of funny moments in it. But to me, when everybody's quipping, no, unless you're comedians and this is a comedy battle, then yeah, sure. But otherwise than that, this is supposed to be a man who's suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. I don't think he's going to be joking around a lot. So, I don't know, Iron Man 3 for me, especially coming out when it did, which was after great movies like Avengers and so forth, there's no excuse to put out a superhero movie like that when you have several examples that you could draw from that are good, that you could say are templates. So let's move on. At number 13, Thor 2, The Dark World. So, again, almost some of the same problems that Iron Man 3 had. At this stage of the game, when that film had come out, there is no excuse to make a bad sequel. There just really isn't. I mean, you take what was the best about the first one and you build upon it. But to me, Thor 2, again, the villain was weak. So Malekith, he's forgettable. There was nothing about him that makes you go, wow, what a great villain. So I thought he was pretty lame. The fact that Thor's mom was kicking his butt and he had to be saved by one of his henchmen. It's just like, to me, if the villain isn't very good, then there's really not much that I can expect for the hero. The hero is only as good as his villain. If the villain is awesome, then that means the hero has to be 10 times that, and to me, that's a better movie. And so here, I'd have to say Thor 2, especially when it came out after other good films that could have been a possible template. I don't know, it wet the bed, and I could say I couldn't support it. I couldn't get behind it. Not to mention some of the annoying side characters that were in there that were obviously in there just for pop culture references. It was too telegraphed. I just couldn't get behind it at all. Number 12 is Iron Man 2. Which is it pains me to say that because I love Jon Favreau. He's one of my favorite directors. You know, he did Swingers, he did Chef, which was good. He did Iron Man 1, which is excellent, which will show up on this list, as you can imagine. So I like Jon Favreau, but I think this is a case of too many chefs having their hands in the pot. And so to me, that movie, it didn't carry it for me. Again, the villain was weak. What was his name again? It was Mickey Rourke playing Whiplash, and then Ian Hammer was in there, and I don't know, it just, again, the villain wasn't memorable, and in fact, Mickey Rourke, because of it, doesn't even want to do another superhero film, because that guy is a legit actor and could have brought so many layers to it, but what we got was he just was a simpleton, and he just wasn't threatening. So I didn't care for that, and I would say probably my favorite part of Iron Man 2 was seeing War Machine suit up against, you know, and then go back to back and take out some robots, but even that wasn't enough to save it, and just... There were other parts about Tony's character. Yeah, he's a drunk, but him fighting in his suit with people at a party, and then trying to scratch and try to be... No, stop it. Number 11, just outside the top 10 of the 14, would be Avengers Age of Ultron. So, again, in the comic books, Ultron is no joke. He's quite threatening. Now, I understand... They put a lot of humor in this because he's supposed to be an AI that's supposed to be built kind of like after Tony. So since Tony's snarky, evidently now the villain needs to be snarky too. Even though in the comics, that is not Ultron. Ultron's a beast in the comics. I mean, he's a superior threat at any level. And in the comic books, again, they went for the jokey joke. And again, I'm not against jokes. Jokes are fine, but they need to be well placed, right? And then you don't want to wear it out. But to me, I just thought, okay, after something as great as Avengers, this is the second one that comes out, and it just seemed like this one was just supposed to be bigger and better. So Avengers Age of Ultron, not very good. I would say the only redeeming thing about this particular flick was the way they showed Black Widow. In fact, Black Widow got some really good character depth and development. So I could see why she's able to hang with the boys. When I can see some vulnerability, that makes a complete character to me. I don't want to see somebody be good because, oh, well, she's the woman, or because it's the black dude, or it's because it's a disabled dude, or because it's a gay dude. I don't want to see that. Show me just a complete character. And I feel like in this movie, one of the best things was we actually got to see another side of Black Widow. We got to see some of her origin, and I was interested. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie, considering when it came out and how much they could have done much better with such a great villain, which I thought was a waste of time, which was a waste actually of a good villain, it just didn't make it for me, and therefore it stays out of the top 10. Number 10 on this list is Doctor Strange. Now I have to put an addendum to this one because Doctor Strange is a film that I actually haven't seen yet, but I have watched a bunch of spoiler reviews and some reviews and talked to people who think a lot like me, and they pretty much said, go see it, maybe at the matinee, it's okay, visually it's stunning, but I know you, and you would want more story, you would want more development, and it's too formulaic. And so I'm going to go off the strength of that. We'll see the movie probably at the matinee, but at the time of this filming, I can be honest and say that I haven't seen it, so that's my full disclosure. But based off of everything that I have seen, I'll critique it off of that, and based off of that, that's how I can put it here at 10. So to me, all I've heard, whether it's true or not, and what seems to be the consensus, is visually it's stunning, it's superb. However, there's a lot left out, a lot of story that's not explained. And at the same time, it just feels paint by number, and it's not that memorable. So, and then you take the idea that I'm not really a big Doctor Strange fan anyway. Don't really care for Doctor Strange. You know, think he's a little overpowered, and really if you have Doctor Strange, you don't really need anybody else because all he could do is just, you know. But hey, that's just me, and maybe I'm trying to be too right-brained right now about it. But I'm going to put it at 10 based off of everything that I've read that I trust so far that I know. And I will see the film, and if I see it and actually like it a little better than I thought I did, well, then I'll have to do an addendum to this video. And you know I'll do it, because all I got to do is just flip on the camera. Number 9, then, this one I actually have seen, and it's AntMan. And AntMan, for me, has the same problem that Doctor Strange does with me. And that is, don't really care for AntMan. I just don't really find him that interesting. I like Paul Rudd, though, and that's another reason why I could get behind it and go see it. Now, I get it was different. It's supposed to be a heist film. But this film, again, what drags it down for me is the fact that the villain, Yellow Jacket, who actually I love Yellow Jacket, but he's not a villain in the comic books. I mean, he gets to be on the Avengers for a while, so he's at some point somewhat good. But again, the villain was weak and unmemorable, and I hated that they changed Yellow Jacket into a bad guy for this one. And so, yeah, I saw the movie. Yeah, it had some yucks, and sure, it's not a bad movie. But again, would I put this in just to watch it? Again, it's the rewatchability factor. I would say no. Movie's fine. It's okay. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Nothing to write home about. You hear that, Mike? Nothing to write home about. Anyway, it's an inside joke. I'll tell you about that later. Number 8 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy. So yes, I'm probably one of those few weird people who just thought this film was okay. I don't think it was as great as everybody was putting on that it was. To me, it was just like Star Wars up in space, but with superheroes who really weren't superheroes, who got together and begun to fight together as if they were superheroes. So I get that. It's fine. I mean, they sold the movie based off of that soundtrack, which is basically putting a bunch of hit songs together from the past and putting it on there. That was part of it. It's genius in a sense, but not necessarily all that creative to a certain degree. And I don't know, the idea that you can have a dance-off and it be taken seriously when a villain's trying to be a threat, again, a villain problem. I thought Ronan was extremely weak, and I didn't learn anything else new really about Thanos, except for he sure is willing to just let a lot of people go out there and try to do stuff for him when they fail, when it seems like to me, you're a mad titan. If you're a mad titan, go handle it yourself and get it done, get it finished. And then you can have those gems, but just trusting for other people to go do it, I don't know. So, to me, it's okay. I'd say my favorite character was probably Groot. But to me, everybody else, it's okay. And number 7 is Thor. So Thor, interesting film. I was never really a big Thor fan, but I was interested in checking this film out. I was interested to see how they were going to portray him finally on the big screen. I liked the way they put his costume together. I thought that was a pretty good adaptation. And I love the introduction of Loki, or Tom Hiddleston, as Loki. And I thought Tom Hiddleston gave a really good performance. So finally, after a while of films that didn't have a good villain, I feel like he was a great villain because he was somebody that on some level you could understand and you could see some of his motivation, albeit still wrong-headed. Still, you got a sense. And so, I don't know, to me, Thor was okay. It was something that I could probably sit down and watch it again. Watching a feud between brothers, I have brothers, and I know how we used to wrestle each other and put each other in a headlock all the time. So yeah, I could kind of get that vibe, and yeah, Thor's fine. It's not as good as some of the others, though. But you probably want to know what those other films are. I'm getting to it. Now, this will probably surprise you at number 6, and that is The Incredible Hulk. Now, I've got to say this. This is probably the redheaded stepchild, the most maligned movie out of all of them, that I don't feel like really deserved it. I felt like, for what it was worth, it was actually probably the best Hulk that we've seen on the silver screen to date. It happened to come in after Iron Man 1. Same year that came out. And of course, that was just gold, but we'll talk about that later. But I thought it was good. I thought Norton's take on Bruce Banner was pretty good. I felt like the villain was worthy. Again, it was kind of like Rock'em Sock'em Robots at the end. So the ending wasn't as memorable as the front part of it, but the first part of the movie, setting it up, the first and second acts, I kind of enjoyed. I kind of put myself in Edward Norton's shoes and said, well, what would I do if I could rage out like that? How would I control it? How would I breathe? And I like the fact that he was, training with jiu-jitsu artists to learn how to control his breathing. I just love that adaptation. I thought that was good. So to me, the Hulk gets kind of gets left off or forgotten, but it shouldn't be. I think it's actually a lot better than a lot of people give it credit. And I bet you if you put the movie in now and watch it, I bet you it holds up a lot better than the villains you've seen in some of these other movies. I'm just saying. And now, the top 5. And then number 5 is, wait for it, Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, this movie is not perfect by any means, and it's one of the few films that I feel like still struggles from a very mediocre to bland villain, even though I love Hugo Weaving, and I think he's great. And if you haven't seen Hacksaw Ridge, go see it, because you'll see some of that. But again, Red Skull, weak villain. However, who couldn't get behind the story of a skinny, bony Steve Rogers, who, like Desmond Doss, wants to go serve his country, even though maybe he's not the best or equipped for it. And so that whole storyline between him and Dr. Erskine, and him talking about what a strong man deserves, what a weak man understands, just some of the lines in that, and then just his heart. Captain America's that do-gooder that you really care about, that do-gooder that we should want to see, and not always just damage heroes that are anti-heroes or people who just damage and emo and then somehow turn good. What about a guy who's just already good-natured? Why can't you just root for him? And not Civil War, but Captain America: First Avenger, it was that. So I'd say the first two acts I was completely in love with. I was enthralled by it, I was entertained, and I dug it. Now, again, the back half of that film falls apart because, again, I just don't feel like the climax equaled what the introduction and the middle part of the film was presenting, because that had much more gravitas to me than watching the eventual fight at the end and then the sacrifice that he makes. But still, a good movie and worthy to be number 5. Number 4, Captain America: Winter Soldier. Yes, I have 2 Captain America films back to back. Now, Winter Soldier is a good film. Now, some of my friends, if you talk to, say like Horror Mike, will put this a little higher on his list. And I think it was a good film. Again, I think for me, what really stuck out about that film was I felt like I liked where they were going with Captain America. I think he's the one that makes the most sense that you could put him in a situation like a Jason Bourne or like an Ethan Hawke. It makes the most sense that you put Captain America there. But then at the same time, he's a little overpowered for a villain like Batroc, because he's superpowered, Batroc isn't. So him fighting George St. Pierre, the UFC fighter, that fight was there, but it really didn't solve anything. Sure, we got to watch some cool moves, but at the end of the day, we already knew he wasn't going to be Captain America, super soldier serum. And if he's running through walls and all this other stuff, I thought Bucky was portrayed well. And I think the only other reason why this is not higher for me is I just felt like Sam Wilson, Captain America's sidekick all of a sudden, he's the cool black sidekick all of a sudden. I just didn't feel like that was earned between those two. They didn't really know each other like the way we saw Bucky and Cap's relationship. And I just felt like it seemed a little easy that Falcon was like, sure, you're in the army, I'm in the army, let's just be buds. So I didn't quite buy that. And again, it's not to knock him. But again, and some people already know, I'm just not a big Falcon fan. The comics didn't really do it for him, but I do like him a little better in Civil War. I think he actually is much better in Civil War. Now, the top 3 of the top 5. And sitting at number 3, and this was a tough one, is Iron Man 1. Yes, the film that started it all off as it concerns Disney properties. To me, this was a solid film. Robert Downey Jr. was making a comeback. He wasn't in a lot of movies at that time. He was kind of in the doghouse in Hollywood. But he comes out and being paired with a director who's as good as Favreau is, and they put that film out there. That was it. It was the essence of a true superhero film, but with the twist of it being a rich billionaire, kind of self-destructive, arrogant narcissist. But you found yourself rooting for him and laughing for him, and then almost sad for him at the same time because he takes that damage in that cave. I love all of it. And again, I would say out of all 3 acts in the film, the opening act, the middle act, and the concluding act, I would say that it was the concluding act, once again, that was probably the weakest part. I love the introduction to the character. I love the complex problem that he was dealing with to try to get out of that cave and then go back and reclaim his father's company while there was espionage, there's ironmongers trying to take over. Good. Loved it. The end, not as strong, but still good. And so Iron Man 1 is going to be number 3 on the top 14 of the Marvel movie. So now this one pick is going to give it all away if you've been watching this time, and thank you for watching. Number 2 is Avengers. Yes. So essentially, Marvel was smart, or Disney was smart, for giving us these little snippets of what is to come since the first Iron Man, which came out in 2008. Since we first saw Nick Fury in the after credits tell us that he's putting a team together, we had to wait several years, which was perfect, because by the time Avengers came out, we were pumped and primed for it. And that movie delivered. Now, you could say, if you had to knock it, that, there were some scenes that maybe were a little kiddie, too kiddish, too cartoonish, too superhero-ish, but I don't think that's enough to knock it from its place, at least on my list at number 2, because we finally, for the first time, got to see all of them on the screen together. Now, you can't duplicate that again, which is why the second Avengers film didn't do as well, because some of the steam is taken out because we've kind of already seen it already. But at this point, seeing this movie, nothing out there was like it. It was excellent. And to me, it's a movie that I can put in and I can watch several times. When it first came out, I watched the DVD several times. So, yeah, this film belongs at number 2 for me anyways because of that, because there's still one thing it didn't do that the number 1 film did do. And that number 1 film that to me got it all right, Captain America movie, Captain America Civil War. So, here again, how do you overcome and try to overcome the stigma of another joint superhero films? Because by now we have X-Men films, we had the Fantastic Four, a couple of tries at that. We've had a subsequent Avengers film before this. So putting a team film back together again and making it work, and then have it have some dramatic weight, and then still be funny at the same time, right? That's it. That's the epitome of it right there. And this was just the 3rd Captain America film. And the interesting thing is as the Captain America films went along, they got better. And that might be because you had the same director on the 2nd one and the 3rd one, the Russo brothers. And so they kind of picked up some of the storyline, at least about the mission report from Captain America Winter Soldier, and carried it over and said, here's how we're going to expand it here. And then, of course, as you know, being a big fan of Black Panther, the way he was portrayed on the screen was perfect. It was a lot like the comics. So I was worried that they were going to have him come in there and he too had to be jokey, funny, and all that stuff. But they let him be who he is. And he's a serious guy, but he's regal, he's royal, and it's a different kind of humor that he would have, you know? And so I loved how they had that. And also, the villain, Zemo. Now, I'm going to crack his skull on this one, but Zemo to me is the best Marvel MCU villain at this point. Yes, better than Loki. And I've got a video talking about that if you need to look at it and check it out. But I'll tell you, Zemo, for a guy who had no advantages that all the other villains had, superpowers, the Tesseract, a boomstick, any of those sort of things, all the resources, an army, Zemo had none of that. Yet he still accomplished his goal by just outsmarting several people, right? So daps on that for sure. And then just that scene between T'Challa, Black Panther, and Zemo at the end, just the way it was written, that was great dialogue. And then not to mention just the battle that was going on between Tony Stark and again at the same time, Steve Rogers and of course Bucky. Just that whole play of, you knew about this but you didn't tell me. And then it was his whole family that was killed by one person, knowing that Tony sees the Avengers as his family. And that's why he wanted to keep them together. He didn't want them to split. And Cap's just selling out for just one dude. You know, Bucky, he'd rather trade in the whole team for just the one guy. Beautiful. Great dramatic tension. So if you didn't like that, and you liked some other film, and maybe it was because it was just more goofy and whatever, okay, maybe. But see, Marvel broke some ground here. Because before this, their films were always the cheery, happy-go-lucky ones, and DC always had the dark and grimy ones. But this one was funny, but it also was serious too. And it balanced both the positive tone with the darker tones well, I thought. And when you walk out of that film, you still are thinking about it. So, I don't know. I don't know how Civil War couldn't be number one. At least for my money, it'll be number one, and I can watch that film over and over again. So anyway, guys, that's me. That's my thoughts. You know what time it is. I'll meet you in the comments section. Tell me, what does your list of 14 look like? What did you have number one? And also, tell me why. And if you have some strong disagreements, hey, be civil about it, right? Tell me about it. Or if you really think I was nailing some of this stuff, tell me that too. Because, you can catch more flies with sugar than you can with vinegar, right? That's what I was always told. So anyway, your turn. It's your boy Vegabomber, and I'm out. Yep. Quack! Just like the Chicago Cubs, knocking home runs, baby. Home runs.